Everyone out there, welcome to the Employer Content Show, part of the Talent Insight series brought to you by Hire Well and Before You Apply. I'm your host, James Hornick. Joining me is my co-host from Before You Apply and the shortest man on your screen, Nate Guggia. And for the first time ever, we have a special guest hailing from London, England, a man who has made a career out of criticizing bad writing and contingent search and proof that parallel evolution exists. From copywriting for recruiters, Mitch Sullivan.
Hello.
Yeah. So I've never actually, hopefully everyone doesn't realize why we don't have guests on. It's because I don't really know what to ask people. But anytime I've been a guest on a podcast, people have asked me for a bio and it's always some boring. I'm like, I'm going to do Mitch's bio myself. But Mitch, if you'd like to introduce yourself properly and just give everyone kind of your background a little bit. So I think some people out there are probably familiar with you. Maybe others aren't, but the floor is yours.
I suspect most people in the recruitment industry in America probably haven't got a clue who I am. So I'm a recruiter. I've been a recruiter a long time, as you can tell from the state of my face and my hair. I am 32 years, I think. I've without boring you with my resume, I've always taken content seriously, even before there were lots of places to put content. When I came into recruitment, the only places you could advertise yourself as a recruiter or recruitment business were in magazines, newspapers, trade journals, or sandwich boards, and walking the streets. So the internet in general changed everything. Took me a while to get my head around it, but it's the best thing that could have happened to our industry, in my view. And I've because content has become, omnipresent. Compared to how it was, it just makes recruitment far more interesting and complex in many ways, because there are so many platforms that have different audiences that you can put content. And I guess I'll just sign off with, when I came into the industry, literally every single engagement we had with a candidate or a client started from a telephone. Now, all of those interactions now start from a keyboard. Learning how to write or to construct sentences, and to write things that people want to read is just critical. And I'm aware of the bias that will probably be coming across, because I sell copywriting training courses to recruiters, but it just is a fact. It all starts from a keyboard.
Yeah. And so you and I have been in touch for, a while now. I think we maybe spoke for the first time probably 6 months ago, but Nate and I have been doing the show for almost coming up on a year, and we discuss all types of content issues. A lot of it ends up being things that are, we'll discuss things that are a little bit high. We're big into video, obviously. We'll discuss things about how teams should be structured differently, how to engage hiring managers and get them involved in the process. And admittedly, a lot of it involves buy-in, and it's somewhat a little bit higher level. But probably a month back, we were talking about what are the two things that literally, what are the two most basic things that every recruiter needs to get good at from a content standpoint? And one of them is their outbound messaging. And the other one is job ads. That's something that's universal, So we wanted to talk about that. And then I forgot. So Nate hates your posts. That was what brought me. As the story goes. So you do a great job really hammering that point about job descriptions and job ads are two completely different things. And I think it's not innately clear to people why at first, which is why I want to talk about it. And I remember the first time, because Nate, because one thing you do, Mitch, that I love is you love trolling people on LinkedIn. And anytime someone says job description when they really mean job ad, you make sure to let them know in comments. And I think you did it to Nate one time. And he's just sidebarring with me. He's like, what is with this Mitch guy? And then he did it again, and then he actually, to your point, he took the time to actually look at the difference between a job description and a job ad and thought about it more. And you gained an advocate in that process. So
yeah, very, very much. The first couple of responses were like, what the hell? What is this? And then, we were kind of talking before we jumped on the show, but I've become a fan, man, and a believer. So this is good stuff. But I think to James's point, it's an education process. We're so used. I mean, when I say we, I think many people are just used to job description. And then when you see an alternative version to that is structured differently and written differently and is designed to do something that a job description isn't.
Yeah.
You're like, oh, wait.
Let's dive in. Let's give Mitch the floor here. Like, what's
for sure.
Okay. Well,
ultimately, what's the difference between the two?
Okay. Well, look, let me just give some context to the trolling of Nate that I was just being accused of. Nate, as I think I've told you, I forgot that I just assumed you've been in the industry a long time, so I was just trying to provoke a conversation. You probably weren't the right person trying to provoke that with, but look, I've done that numerous times on lots of threads. Mostly, it would seem on threads that are mostly populated with US and Canadian recruiters, and that's because I've started talking about content and creating job ads versus job descriptions on LinkedIn to a UK audience for about 5 or 6 years now, because it was 6 years ago that I had the idea that I was gonna build and run training courses on this subject, and lo and behold, it took off really quickly. And so I've been talking about this for a long time. I tend to only bring it up on threads with US and Canadian recruiters because they seem to conflate the two more than recruiters in the UK for some reason. I don't really know. I mean, UK recruiters do it as well, but it seems more prevalent in the US. So look, they're different. There's lots of ways of looking at the difference between the two documents. I tend to look at most things from a marketing perspective. Therefore, in light of that, it's right. Well, who's the customer? Who's reading it? Yeah, and why are they reading it? And that's really what I think brings us to the best definition. Nobody's going to read a job spec right at the very beginning of a recruitment process, and a job posting is the very beginning of the recruitment process for many people. Most people, I would hasten to add. Nate will probably argue that there's plenty of people that will research companies, look at their content, maybe sign up some emails, and they do, and that is effective as well. But I think the job ads is probably the pointiest part of the arrow. So the only people that might read a job description are people that need another job. But even then, I would argue they'll probably scan it or skim read it just to see if it's vaguely representative of what they think they can do before they click apply and send a CV. So job descriptions are never going to do the work of a job ad, because a job ad is there to convince someone that this job might be better than the one that they're doing, or the last one that they did, or other jobs that they're currently applying for. Essentially, a job ad in its truest definition is something that sells a job to somebody who might be able to do that job and who might want to do it. Now, you can't completely sell a job in a job ad or in 400 words, but you've got to start the process of getting people to think, actually, this looks like it. This might improve my life in some way. And that is the purpose of a job ad, is to get someone to want to read it, first of all, to respond to it on the basis that they think this job might improve their life in some way. A job description, on the other hand, is something that somebody will read once they've decided that it's a job that they're interested in and that it might improve their life in some way. Then they will read 900 words of compliance-laden content, because that's got the nuts and bolts and the mechanics of the job, and they'll probably want to read it just to make sure there's no nasty surprises in there before they move on in the process. So, it's important. It's just not, it should never be used at the very front end of the process. The one exception is that if you're posting a job where you know that there will be plenty of available candidates for whatever reason, then I would argue you don't need to create a job ad. You just need to announce the fact that there's a job available, give them some details, what they're going to need to qualify, and give them some kind of call to action. But jobs where there are relatively few candidates actively on the market at any one time looking, then you're going to have to sell the job to them one way, shape or form. And just to finish off, a job ad can take the form of a job posting, an email, an in-mail, or a social media post. It can even take the form of a phone conversation with some modifications, but yeah.
Okay. Do you want to, we talked about doing a quick screen share. Do you have that up? Do you want to, just to give everyone a little visual context and the difference too? Because when you and I talked about it, I kind of got it, But then afterwards you sent me some examples of a few different, I think it might have been what some of your clients or something were putting together. And the difference is kind of night and day.
Okay. What I'll do is I'll show you. Well, okay. Here we are. Right. I'm showing. I'm not sure. Right. Here's a job. Here's a job description. It's 851 words, and I blacked out the name of the client to protect the guilty. And this particular company ran this ad for a few years back, and contacted me to ask me to help them because it didn't work.
Looks boring. Was probably a copy of a copy of a copy.
Yeah, no, it's
no one's reading this.
It's completely unreadable. So I'm now going to show you a treatment that Jackie and I put on this particular job. I ran an ad for this job, but I had to create something that people were actually going to read. The original ad, as I just showed it to you, I think it received 17 applications, of which one could have been suitable. So I ran a different version of the ad, which I'll show you.
People on the podcast version may be really lost right now, but go to YouTube when you get to this part. All right, we're up.
Yeah. So the second version is the first version is just a shorter version of that job spec I just showed you, but it's still a job spec because it only talks about the company. We're looking for, we're this. Here's what you'll be doing, and here's what you need to have. Please send your CV to blah blah blah. Now our version tells people. Immediately speaks to an inherent benefit. So Sarah got promoted. Could you? Sarah was the person who used to do the job. She's just been promoted, which illustrates the fact that this company have some kind of succession planning going on, and that you can move beyond this job. You probably want to know what's involved. Look, you can post a link where people can read this in more detail later, but it just tells people what they'll be doing in a very conversational tone of voice. Doesn't go into real heavy specifics. It doesn't use what I call demand language, as you must this, you must have this. It's written as if you were talking to this person face to face. It's got an easy to respond to call to action. It promises that everyone that makes the effort to respond will get a response. Because my view is that anything you can write or do or say that would encourage one extra qualified person to respond has got to be worth doing. So I promise people that they'll get a response, and that's it. That's just one example.
Did you have metrics about how many more responses you got on that one? Yeah.
That ad produced 48 responses, and I only put it on 2 job boards, so it could have got a lot more, but I knew it would work, honestly, because it's a relatively junior position. It's quite well paid for an admin role. It was working for quite a big company, PLC.
So more than double the response rate just by writing something that's actually reader focused as opposed to posting.
It wasn't so much that was interesting. It was the fact that I had conversations with, I think it was 11 people, and 7 of them were, in my view, worthy of submitting to the client. I did this on a fixed fee basis. They just paid me to do this work. I wasn't earning a placement fee. And they interviewed all 7 people, liked them all. The feedback was they liked them all. And ironically, and this is interesting, and this could take the conversation in another direction, they hired the candidate with the least obvious experience.
Huh.
Really?
So they end up hiring someone who probably wouldn't have ever applied to the first job because people are like, I don't have the years of experience unless you're actually telling them to apply anyway, which
possibly.
Yeah.
Possibly. Yeah. They've never done a formal sales admin support role in another company.
Yeah.
In fact, the candidate, I remember him because he was a lovely guy. He worked at Windsor Castle where the Queen lives.
Oh, yeah.
And he was doing all their sort of multimedia stuff. So he was organized. He had an interesting personality. He had a good work ethic. He was young enough to be developed. He was trainable, coachable. That's what they saw and they hired him. So yeah.
What I like about the approach is that, everyone talks about how we need to make things more human. And I never know what that really means. Like, make things more personalized, make it more human, make it more empathetic. Yet you're just posting like, here's a chance to actually do that. Like, write something that you're trying to put in front of people that's written like an actual human would write something, as opposed to just like a list of descriptions, about a job.
Yeah.
And the results work. So
it's interesting, I've got a theory as to why people keep posting job descriptions and expecting them to behave like job ads. If you want to hear it, do you want to hear
Sure.
my theory? Yeah. Because I'm old enough to remember when the internet first came along and job boards first started happening, it suddenly became very, very inexpensive for agencies and companies to run ads. It went from costing thousands to costing, literally almost pennies. Yeah. You could run, 20 job ads for £100, whereas a decent sized semi-display ad would cost you, £1,000, let's say, depending on the publication. So the novelty was people could find jobs really quickly. They could apply to them really, really quickly. Everyone was happy. But as time wore on, and as people's experiences with recruitment in general, and maybe agencies in particular, in terms of not hearing back or not getting feedback if they get an interview, or the job not quite matching what they understood to have read on the job posting, and so on. And then the rise of social media and more people talking about their experiences with recruiters and recruitment. Candidates, I call them people, but people that apply for jobs became more and more jaded. Social media has popularized this human approach to communication. It's far less formal. Social media promotes just people talking, using emojis, using colloquial language, maybe using profanity from time to time. And that's just where we are right now. So that sort of formal, compliance-driven kind of content that you typically see in job postings, it just doesn't work anymore. Or it doesn't. It only works. The only people that it's going to work with are people who need another job. But if you're a recruiter trying to fill a tricky-to-fill job, the chances are that most of your target candidates are going to be in a job that they don't need to leave. Therefore, some persuasion is going to need to brought to bear.
How do you feel about go ahead, Nate, you're going to ask something.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have some tactical questions.
Yeah.
When you were showing the differences, one thing that came up in my mind was, does every job description need an accompanying job ad, or can you create a job ad that is like an umbrella for multiple job descriptions?
You can create, well, first of all, to answer that in sequence, not all job descriptions need a job ad.
Okay.
If it's a relatively easy to fill job, then I don't think you need to put in the time and the effort to create an ad that is going to be compelling in some way. Unless the one caveat to that is, unless quality is of particular importance. There's a particular type of candidate, or your demands of who is going to be qualified to do that job is particularly high, in which case you're probably going to need to sell the job quite well in the first half of the ad. If in the second half of the ad, you're going to start laying down some quite heavy demands as to what the candidate's going to need to have to qualify. Mm-hmm. To answer your second question, you can create a really good job ad for a particular job. And then once you've got that finished product, you can then create variations of that same ad that will sell 2 or 3 other aspects of the job. Because normally a job will have 3 or 4 things about it that the hiring company think should be attractive to the target candidates. It could be better training, better boss, interesting culture, work-life balance, remote working, could be money, could be a bigger challenge, could be bigger scope, could be better resources. A lot of people generally, once, in my view and in my experience, most people who have achieved some kind of mastery over whatever it is they do, be it Java development or marketing or sales or mechanical engineering, most of those people, the primary motivator for most of those people is to want to get better at what they do, generally. And that can be achieved through either personal development, training, mentoring, just having access to more things to play with, more resources, better tech, or it could be, they're dealing with a bigger audience. Maybe the product is more ambitious, their colleagues are smarter. I mean, there are a ton of things that can show people how working at a particular place might improve their career prospects in general. And for me, those are the things that need to be worked if you're going to write something compelling that's going to persuade someone to send you their resume.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Got more, Nate? Keep going.
Okay.
This is also why we like doing 2-person shows, so you know exactly whose turn it is to talk. Now we're going back and forth, who should go now?
I know there's just a lot of questions. You touched on metrics or measurements. Measuring this. You knew the stats pretty quickly. I think you said 7 qualified out of 11. And now is when it comes to something like this, I also want to talk about distribution, because I always think of content in there's 2 sides of it. There's the creative, and then there's the getting it in front of people wherever they spend their time part. Yeah. The first thing I'm thinking about is the measuring. Is this a qualitative thing, or is this a quantitative, numbers thing? How do you find out if this is working?
Well, it can be quantitative if recruiters measure it. I've collected I've collected evidence from a handful of recruiters who have measured ads, old ads, new ads, based on the training they've received, and then they've gone out and written a better ad, and the results that they've shared with me have been positive, both quantitatively and subjectively in terms of the quality, just from reading it, at least to my eyes. It's a tricky one. Quantities can be a contentious area when it comes to recruitment marketing, because fundamentally, I don't think a job ad success should be measured by numbers of responses. There are lots of very, very, very bad, almost unreadable job postings that get hundreds of responses. And that can be down to the stature of the company, the type of job, the level of unemployment in that particular geographical region, or in how many different places they put it. Because the more places you put it, more people are going to see it, more people are going to respond. But for me, the metric should always be more qualitative. And I know that there are some judgments that need to be made in terms of, where are we going to put it? Do we feed it out to the various channels slowly just to see what we get back, so we don't need to necessarily spend more money? That can then be related to the urgency of getting candidates into the pipeline. So it can get complicated quite quickly. But for me, it should always be about quality, because unlike other forms of creative writing or creative advertising, job ads don't need to find hundreds of customers. They only need to find one.
Right. Yeah. 1 out of 1.
Yeah. If it's the right person and they tick all the boxes that you've specified in the ad, and they want to do the job for the right reasons, and it makes sense, there is some kind of logical career progression to them doing this job, be it financially or whatever else from a learning perspective, then you only need one candidate. So if people are looking for a quick and dirty guide to measuring the quality of their job posting or their job ad, and I've got quite pedantic about how I describe job ads now, because a job ad is something that sells a job. A job posting is just content that tells people about a job. But the best way, or a quick and dirty way of measuring the quality of an ad, is to count up how many people responded who are currently employed. That's always one barometer. Is how many of those people responded who don't need another job but were intrigued on some level.
Question I got, because Nate and I talk about this a lot, is how you can use content to also signal to people who really won't be a fit for the job or for a company to not apply, right? So I think that when it comes to job descriptions, when job descriptions are posted to job ads, they might just see, they'll probably look at the title and the company name, and that's probably all they're going to, and they're either going to pull the trigger or not. If they're unemployed, they're probably going to just, whatever. have you taken that approach, or have you seen value from that standpoint in getting less people to respond who clearly aren't, maybe they wouldn't like the vibe of the company? I don't know if I'm just curious.
Okay, look, not much, I'll be honest. I've dabbled in it, but normally I only get involved where the perception is that the job is going to be tricky to fill.
Okay.
Which is why I'm involved, and sometimes I'll bring in a partner, another recruiter who specializes in that particular job discipline. So together we'll work the vacancy. So I'll do the front end, the kind of attraction stuff, and he or she will do the assessment part of the process. I did once run an ad that carried some mild profanity because the culture of the company was quite sweary. And so I wanted to get that across. A couple of job boards refused to run it, which disappointed me slightly. Yeah. I argued that bullshit is not a swear word, but they thought it but yeah, so then people can then make a judgment as to, if they don't like that kind of thing, they don't apply. Generally, my attitude is, if you want to be demanding as to the type of candidate you want to respond, then you have to do a particularly good job of selling the job in the first half of it. So basically, to dust it very crudely, if the optimal word count for a job posting is 400 words, the first 200 should only talk about the reader, what's in it for them, how their life might be made more rewarding, how the job might be more enjoyable, or what they're going to get out of it. It must use lots of you language, and should be written in a sort of a friendly, sort of colloquial tone of voice. That's the best way of getting across company culture, is the way you write the ad, not saying we're a fun, wacky place to work. Yeah, because everyone's saying that. And then in the second half of the ad, the better a selling job you've done in the first half of the ad, the more demanding you can be in the second half. And of course, what you've done is you've got people to want to keep reading, and that's the first objective of any job posting, is to get someone to read the first sentence, because everyone will read the first sentence of a job posting if they've clicked it to expand it, and that's your opportunity to get them to want to keep reading. And the two easiest ways to get people to want to keep reading anything is to either explicitly tell them what's in it for them if they keep reading, or to use something that I call a pattern disruptor. We're getting into advanced territory here, where you write something that kind of grabs their attention because they're not expecting to read that in the first line of an ad. Mm-hmm. Disrupts their pattern of thinking when it comes to job postings. But if you do use that technique, you've then got to quickly explain whatever metaphor you've used and how that would relate to the candidate. But yeah, it's got to be all about the reader.
Mm-hmm.
What about, so the two things I want to hit on, we talked about some of these things a little bit, like the inertia of it. I do want to come back to distribution, because I want to talk about social media and how they can be distributed. But before we kind of skip over, so inertia, this is not, I probably reading your post maybe 9 months ago was the first time this even struck me as like a concept. And I've been in this industry in the US for a long time, right? I'm trying to determine, it's just not something that's talked about here. And I think there's just general inertia issues in recruiting in general. This is it's not a progressive industry typically, right? So I have some thoughts on why. I'm curious as to what you've seen there. And it sounds like it's a little more understood in the UK, but do you have any other thoughts on the inertia in general? I can go off on a tangent here, but.
No, it sounds like an interesting one. Maybe we should come back and talk about that, because that sounds fascinating. Interesting. Maybe the UK has always been kind of at the forefront of creativity in general, across ad agencies in general, perhaps down the years. Mm-hmm. There may be people that argue with it. I follow some great ad people on LinkedIn who are American, who I know are very good at what they do and very creative. So I'm not sure about that. Anyway, secondly, why more so Americans? I don't know. I think people have just got locked into a pattern of behavior. This is how you post a job ad. This is how we've posted job ads since 1998 or 2001 or whenever it was. And when they don't work, they blame the job board or the target audience for some reason.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I do think that I don't know enough about the UK recruiting market, but in the States here, like most recruiters start their career at one of the large firms. You come out of school, you get hired by, I'm not going to name any of them, but and those places are very much run like boiler room operations. You know, it's very metrics driven, micromanagement. And it's the kind of environments where creativity or thinking outside the box is just not rewarded whatsoever, you know.
I would argue that it's not thinking outside the box. I would argue that taking the approach I've just outlined to posting a job is just basic good salesmanship or good salespersonship. Yeah. And America being the home of the salesperson, I would have thought that would be a concept that most Americans could easily latch onto. I think there's a lack of engagement because I think a lot of recruiters are overworked. They're told. I think that's particularly true of in-house recruiters. Many in-house recruiters have got way too many requisitions on their desk, so they're kind of flooded. I think a lot of recruiters, both agency and in-house, and this is probably the biggest single reason for the inertia to create content that people are going to want to read, is that they actually think that the status of the company is going to be the attractive feature that's going to drive people to potentially be in that job. And in my view, unless your name is Disney, Starbucks, Microsoft, or Apple, or something like that, Google, people, just isn't the case. The agencies do that; they run blind ads, because obviously they're working contingency. They can't reveal who the client is, and the client's probably working with 3 other agencies anyway. But they pepper the content with exciting, dynamic, world-leading, unrivaled, unparalleled. They're all these kind of adjectives that oversell the company probably, but don't speak to anything that's important to the reader. The only types of candidates generally that are turned on by the stature of the company, if true, are younger people that are in the beginning of their career journey rather than those people in the middle of it. Yeah.
And it's interesting. It's not the same, but I mean, Nate and I always talk about similar things, and just like if you can raise the profile of your company, it works. If you can just become more well-known through content or whatever else. But that's not to say that that's the only way you should be doing things, right? So,
So if we, whenever I post or talk about this stuff, I'm speaking specifically to hard to hire candidates. People like you're talking about, Mitch. It's like people who are employed, heavily recruited, really competitive market, like that kind of a thing. And it's the equivalent of an enterprise level, software sale, where enterprise level reps will work an account for a year to sell $1 million deal or something. And that's like at a software company, those enterprise reps are paid extremely well. And it is known that this is not an overnight process, and that it takes like a certain level of like engagement and awareness and showing up a lot and developing relationships and all this stuff. It's like where like the whole like golf course thing came from, right? Like take clients out on the golf course or steak dinners and stuff like that. But for some reason, like you transfer that over to recruiting like a senior level data engineer, who is like already like gainfully employed and who has like offers all over the place. For some reason, that same mentality doesn't apply, but it is the same.
Totally agree.
So like the behavior, you're trying to cram like entry level recruiting behavior to an enterprise level sale. And there's a big disconnect.
And the only rational explanation I can find to why companies and the agencies that they use to represent them do that is because they think they're doing the world a favor by having job vacancies. That's the only rational answer I can think of, because it doesn't make any sense on any other level. Because somebody, a data engineer who's probably earning, I don't know what, $100,000 a year, typically, 120, 150. They're serious people. They put a lot of effort into their career to become what they've become. They probably manage their career quite seriously. In terms of looking before they leap. So there has to be an element of seduction and transparency and information sharing to get them to a point where they they're going to make the decision to join another company. And let's not forget that changing jobs is one of the 5 most stressful things that we all do as human beings in our lives. Apparently, it's right up there with falling in and out of love and or getting married, dying, public speaking, buying a house. There may be 1 or 2 others as well, but it's in that. Yeah. So, I think we should be affording a little bit more respect to the process. Absolutely. But that's another subject as well.
Yeah. That's just, it falls in. I think there's a misconception of how hard it is to your same point to do. And a lot of people who haven't been in recruiting, and maybe it's heads of HR who don't come from recruiting, maybe it's business owners, that they underestimate how hard it is, and they think it's way more transactional than it is. They treat it like a transactional sale versus a consultative sale. So
and honestly, I think a lot of agencies have promoted that mindset in the mind. Some, just from their behaviors and what they hear about people's experiences with recruiters, in terms of them being sort of commission hungry chasers, I think it's a little bit of a over stereotype, but I don't know. I honestly, the whole people are our greatest asset mantra that gets punted out there by CEOs and directors, but none of that is ever reflected in any aspect of their visible recruitment process, their career pages, their job ads, their digital footprint generally.
Let's we got a little bit of time here left, so I want to get down to the social media. And Nate, I think you're going to ask, we don't talk about distribution, right?
Yeah.
A job ad on like a formal, like the job posting part of LinkedIn or any other site versus just like putting it in your social feed, right?
Okay.
What are your thoughts on like what's the best way to maximize things? What are people responding to better? I'm curious what your clients are doing, what you're doing.
Okay. Well, look, since I decided to move into coaching, which I made that decision 10, 11 years ago, and my the first thing that I did was teaching good contingency recruiters how to move to retained. And I still do a bit of work in that area now, but the copywriting thing has kind of taken over for the last 5 years. So in terms of my approach to social media, I mean, I went out deliberately to become well known amongst the UK agency audience. LinkedIn, they're all there. So it's a perfect platform for doing that. And I did it by taking the piss out of contingency. By writing blogs that were sometimes accused of being a little bit overcritical, a little bit harsh, the sarcasm a little bit too heavy. I would start arguments deliberately on threads to get noticed. But in my defense, and that sounds like very troll-like behavior, and to some extent it is, but I never ever said anything I couldn't back up, ever. And if there's one golden rule anyone should take to social media is say what you like, say it in whatever way you like, but you have to be able to back it up if someone questions you. And that's what I did. And eventually more recruiters grew to like me a bit more. There is still a whole bunch of people out there that can't stand me because of that those early years. I mean,
Nate was one of them a couple months ago. So
Wait, hold on. It wasn't Mitch in general. I was having trouble seeing the difference between job descriptions.
Hey, no, listen, welcome, Nate. So look, the point I was going to make was I've built a big network of recruiters. So on the occasions where I'm asked to help a client of mine recruit recruiters, I can put an ad on LinkedIn and it will perform way better than me putting that same ad on 4 mainstream job boards.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I think the future for a lot of recruiters that work particular niches that are embedded in a particular niche or a particular job discipline is to build audiences of people who do that kind of work, be it on LinkedIn or Twitter or Instagram or all of them or Facebook. And build an audience, and that way you never have to pay for an ad again. Yeah. And it's got to be more for a lot of them. Gotta be.
The absolute worst posts are the people who basically post slimmed down job descriptions, bullet points in their LinkedIn feed. I have unfollowed multiple people.
Yeah. No, I understand.
That's their thing.
And a little insight into the mindset is where they start with, we're really excited to announce that. Yeah. Nobody cares what you think. Nobody cares what you think until they know what you can do for them. And if more companies adopted that mindset, their job postings would improve like that.
Stealing that, by the way. Definitely going to make a post making fun of that. So again, I have a few minutes. I don't know, Nate, do you have any other questions you wanted to get across here with Mitch, or while we got him on the show?
No, we kind of covered. I think we covered most of what I was thinking, or what I wanted to ask here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I feel like we have like more to talk about at another time.
Yeah.
We should have been better prepared, shouldn't we? Really?
Well, I think we should do like a part 2 and then maybe even a part 3, or I don't know. Who knows?
Yeah, we can come back to this. It's people are going to get bored here. It's been about 45 minutes, but there's a lot that a lot of these topics are things we can kind of deep dive around. So.
Yeah, look, the whole social media thing is interesting because I put a lot of energy into social media. I never join in with the threads that you see increasingly, or at least in my feed, of people talking about social media and how to maximize readership and blah, blah, blah. I never join in those conversations because I don't see the point. But there's clearly an appetite for people to want to learn to get better at it. So, I've been doing it for a long, long time. I'd be happy to share what I've learned with you guys.
Okay, last question. So this is observation. So Nate and I, we've always been, Mitch, when you and I talked last, I think you were mentioning like commenting is really the long game in LinkedIn, right?
Yeah.
Nate and I were all on board that until probably 3 or 4 months ago. Like there was, I've noticed 2 things. One, both of us have lists of people we like to follow, and I'll just open those all up in one fell swoop, and that way I can kind of see what all they post every day.
Right.
I've noticed that's dried up. Like I would say of the list of 40 people I really like to see, probably half of them quit posting since this year started.
Right.
And the other ones, I'd say another quarter. I don't know. I feel like they mailed it in. And then I look at my feed, and I feel like I like deliberately for this show, because I know you mentioned that to me, I tried to find like posts to start commenting on this week, and it's been really hard.
Right.
And I'm curious your thoughts on like what is happening with LinkedIn.
I know. I think we all have different experiences depending on who's in our network and where we're situated and what we do for a living. Look, to give you a very quick and dirty overview of this, I connect with any recruiter. Anyone who works in recruitment sends me a connect. I connect with them. But I also look to actively connect with anyone who uses social media well, particularly recruiters who do. I seek out recruiters who have opinions. And I will occasionally do a search for certain types of people and look what they're posting about, because sometimes or often I'll have an opinion. And sometimes I'll do a search in the content area of LinkedIn. I'll just put some keywords in and just see who's commenting about a particular subject, and then I'll dive into the thread and just make some comments, like some other comments, and just join the conversation. And often that provides me with much of my material, much of my thinking. So other people are presenting ideas, presenting theories, presenting opinions, and all I'm doing is piggybacking off the back of them. And often I've been in these conversations, I've started typing something and I'll get 60, 70 words in. I think, hang on, this is too good for a comment. This needs to become a blog. And so I'll cut and paste it and put it into a Word document and then go back to it later and turn it into something, be it a blog, an article. So for me, joining in discussions is critical to my entire strategy of producing content and being visible. Absolutely fundamental. Yeah.
Right. So Mitch still has better follows than we do, Nate. So his feed's still working for him.
Yeah. But like Mitch, like James and I for a long time, that's like kind of our MO is we use comments as fodder for our own posts. Right. So I start encouraging, like, if somebody drops like a really good comment on one of my posts, I just reply to them and say, like, turn this into a post. Like, I'm trying to get people to understand that you're creating value in that post itself, but then you're also helping yourself, like, just think through these ideas. It's just the best of both worlds. And when you can get into that rhythm, you're just like never lacking content or ideas. You're just like always thinking in terms of posts. It sounds very strange, but practitioners understand it.
Totally. And look, I know people in the recruitment training industry who think that they're some sort of guardians of some mythical secrets or that there's some sort of magic bullets to maybe helping recruiters be successful, which is complete horseshit, by the way, as I'm sure you know. But one of the other fundamentals that I follow is just give it all away. Yeah. Tell anyone anything they want to know about how to do something. Yeah. Because that's the easiest way to establish credibility and respect from people, is when you give them advice that works, that makes sense. And that's what I've always done. I've never been shy of, trying to, I've never been consumed with thinking I've got to protect certain areas of knowledge that I have or experience. I just share it.
Yeah. It's not going to keep people from paying you. The ones who are going to pay you are going to pay you anyway. And you're going to help a lot of people who maybe can't afford you and who can go take what you're teaching them and do it themselves. It's like, it's a total win-win.
There will be some people that will pick up on things that people say on social media and maybe follow them. And a couple of people have said this to me, that they've just read my stuff for a year and then just applied it and made it work. There are people, I've seen people over the last 4 or 5 years, recruiters, who are putting out decent ads that have never been through my training. So I'm not taking credit for that, by the way, but they clearly are people that have got some natural ability and have learned some theory and some best practice and put it together, and things have clicked, and they're starting to produce decent ads without ever having any formal training. Yeah, there will always be people that can do it themselves, for sure. Yeah.
All right.
Are you done with me?
Yeah, good show, guys. Yeah, I got a meeting. It's starting in about 10 minutes, but let's do this again sometime. This is good. Yeah. I think there's a lot more room we have to kind of go in some of this stuff. So that's a wrap for the Employer Content Show. If you want to hear more of what Nate and I and Mitch have to say, you can subscribe to the Higher Well channel on YouTube, where we have a playlist of all of our episodes, and the Talent Insights podcast, which is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon, and Spotify. Nate, thanks for coming as always. Mitch, it's great to have you on this time. And everyone out there, we'll see you soon.
Thank you, James. Thanks, Nate. Take care, guys. See you.
Bye-bye.